Welcome to the Pinelander Podcast, the official podcast of Pineland, broadcasting to you from an undisclosed location deep inside Pineland, where we discuss faith, family, finances, firearms, freedom, food, and everything else in between, with those who believe in living free and living out the values that made this country free. All right, welcome to the Pinelander Podcast. My name is Paul LaFavor. I'm here with my ranger buddy, Mike Blackburn. Today is Friday, Cinco de Mayo. And we're back again with another, back with that same topic we just hit last time. That's really battlefield ethics, kind of revisiting that and the importance of that. And I hope you got a lot of, I know I did the last time talking to Kevin Maines. Certainly a lot of weight on leadership, which rightfully so.
Yep.
If you're in that position of leadership, then you need to step up to the plate and make things happen. So kind of segueing from that, today we're bringing in another subject matter expert, Chaplain John Phelps. Is going to give us his take. Chaplain Phelps is a Navy chaplain. He's been on the podcast again before. Last time we were talking about counseling. So, John, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you, Paul. It's good to be here today. I appreciate you guys letting me have a little space.
Absolutely. I mean, and this way we get, we had the Marines. It was, Kevin was representing the Marines. And then here John here's with the Navy.
The Army.
We just got to get the Air Force.
Where are they at?
Oh, we got to find somebody.
Got to find an airman. Got to find an airman out there.
Air-conditioned building somewhere in the bottom.
Exactly. They're busy playing golf.
Absolutely. Hey, but John, I'm excited about the topic today. And really, one thing I wanted to get into is, in light of something like 9% of America's military serving age is considered capable of serving, only 9%. And, the rest are not physically fit. They're not mentally fit. They're not socially ready. That other, 91% don't do math in public. They're not capable of actually serving.
And they don't meet minimum requirements.
The minimum requirements. And so that's just astronomical to me. I know you know that. And I just wanted to ask you, as a chaplain, as a man who has faced a lot of tragedy, a lot of moral injury that you've seen in the ranks, I just want to ask you, are we having our people prepared to serve in light of how they're being raised and they're coming to you, they're coming to the ranks? Can we really say they're ready to do the job?
Honestly, Paul, that's a hard question because in my experience, I would say, no, I don't think society is preparing them. I don't want to go off on a tangent here, but it feels to me, we've talked before, kind of like an erosion of the warrior class. And I think some of it is societal. I think some of it is just the what's going on in our world and technology, the good, bad, and the ugly of what the social networking society has done. And I'll throw you a curveball here. I think a lot of it has to do with not having a unified sense of purpose. It seems like there's a lot of division in our country right now, and a loss of patriotism, really.
No doubt. And that certainly has an effect. I mean, obviously, it goes without saying that the recruitment is down terribly for all services. And obviously with, in light of the last 2 or 3, 4 years of events, I think you have a lot less people, instrumentally, what's the word I'm looking for? There's a lot less people that are joining, and they're just seeing the wokeness. They're seeing the stuff the hoops they have to jump through, and whatever it is, the jab or the ideology they have to bow the knee to, and they just look at all this and they say, I don't think so. And definitely that's a live nerve.
Well, Kevin had brought up, narcissism, nihilism, a lot of a culture that doesn't emphasize.
Yeah, what are you going to give me?
Yeah,
what do I get?
It doesn't emphasize the service aspect. It's more like exactly what is this going to do for me? What are you doing for me lately? And I think with that focus, I think obviously the armed forces is probably not going to look that appealing.
Yeah, I think this stuff is definitely in the water. One thing, I was talking to a major one time, and he was talking to me about some of the problems that we're dealing with nowadays. And he said, back during the Iraq War and OEF and OIF, you just didn't see these kind of shenanigans going on. This kind of erosion in the morality really and leadership and something. I think, Paul, you're more of a historian than I am, but if you look at throughout history, I mean, we've always had the voice that said, hey, we shouldn't be doing this, war is bad, war is wrong, and everybody's always had their the reasons, and I'm not trying to pick on anybody, but if you look at what happened back in most recent history for all of us, in 9/11, and how our country just kind of came together. And God forbid, I hope that never happens again. But it goes back to that thing I mentioned earlier, is that we don't have this sense of unifying purpose. And I think a lot of people don't see the real threat that is out there. The voice that is heard so often is the one that says America's a terrible place. And it's like, really, have you ever traveled? Have you ever gone to a country? I mean, I've entered countries. I was afraid to take a Bible because I was afraid I might be arrested for it. And there's plenty of places like that where, yes, I'm not saying we're perfect. We have our issues, but I think it goes back to the undertones of society, and people don't really see a need right now, a reason. They don't perceive the threat that we all know, as service members and vets, that we know the threat is real and it's always there, even if the public is not tracking on it.
Yeah, and in this vein that we're talking about too, something that Kevin was talking about is there's all this uncertainty. So you have these people that show up that are a little narcissistic. What about me? Not a lot of selfless service, in their tool bag, and then they have this. There's nothing that it's like, hey, what do we believe? What are our values? It's hard to nail it down. And so then they show up, and then they've got a deployment tempo and the stress, and then you've got then they have nothing really to as a foundation. And I would you agree?
I do. And I don't. I mean. So I'm a little more optimistic. I don't know if it's so much nihilism. I think that stuff, again, is in the water. But what I think is some of it's, cultural conditioning, the whole concept of, hey, we don't want to disappoint anybody. Everybody gets a trophy. A lot of these kids, they haven't been prepared to deal with stress. They don't know how to. They don't hold a lot of them to a unifying truth. Because the big message now is, hey, there's no one truth. Everybody's truth is truth, and so that there's nothing to hang on to in the storm. And this also sense that, and this is not for me, from another chaplain friend of mine who did a lot with resiliency retreats. He said, some of the problem is people don't know how to deal with their stress. They don't know healthy outlets for it, and the second one is like they don't realize that some stress is good stress. There's a great book. I'm not going to advertise for anybody, but I read a good book on, talking about how adversity, can make us stronger, and we need that. And, even if you listen to good old Viktor Frankl, he talks about, that absence of challenge or adversity or purpose, throws us in this existential vacuum. And I think you see a lot of that these days because, there's no real sense of purpose. And so these kids, they come in, they don't know how to cope with their stress, and a lot of them, are looking for something better because, maybe the home life wasn't great or things were falling apart or, and they come in and then they face a lot of adversity, some unnecessary, as Kevin I'm sure mentioned, and some necessary, and they don't know how to deal with it, and they need guidance, they need mentorship. Some of it goes back to a lack of solid mentorship growing up, good role models that teach them how to face life.
I mean, awesome. I mean, because really, what you're we've talked about this before, is what you're trying to get them to avoid is moral injury. You want them to avoid, the train wreck. And I know,
I'm sorry, but yeah, to speak on that, and I just want to put my definition out there, because a lot of, so the bottom line to me, moral injury is when you basically break your own rules. Okay, we talk about spiritual fitness in the military and spirituality, and the easiest definition that we use in the chaplain corps is, at the most basic level, spirituality is what we draw meaning and purpose from in life. How we define right and wrong, whether that is from a more standard Judeo-Christian or another religious background, or whether it's our own set of rules, whether we were taught or we came up with them. When we break our own rules, we do something or we experience something that we inherently know in our soul that is wrong. It violates either we violated what we know to be good or someone else has, and that is what causes that internal conflict, that moral injury.
Wow, yeah, that's it's a very helpful definition. Oftentimes we hear these terms kind of thrown around, and we don't really, because they say, wisdom is the definition of terms, as Socrates has once said. But that idea is, could we just say that we're seeing a kind of an explosion of moral injury, or we're just seeing more stupid stuff morally because people are just showing up and they don't have the right value system, they don't have the right foundation? I mean, is that too simplistic to say that?
I think that's definitely part of it. These kids they're, and I don't mean to say kids. I mean, I'm getting old, I guess.
Yeah,
so
you're an old guy.
These young guys coming in. I'm an old guy, right?
Yeah,
so these guys coming in, these young men and women coming in. Let's be fair and honest here. A lot of them, I ask that question. Well, tell me who you are. Let's say the guy's name's Joe. All right, Joe. Let's just forget rank and everything. Joe, tell me who Joe is. And he goes, "That's it, chaps. I don't even really know." So they haven't really, and gosh, if I look back when I was 18, 19, 20, I probably thought I knew who I was, but I really didn't. So you have that. You have the inability to deal with stress. You have people trying to feel good about themselves, and a lot of times making wrong choices, right? We need that gratification, and if we don't know how to do it in a healthy way, we're going to do it in an unhealthy way. And then there's that shame piece that comes in, like, oh wow, I broke my own rules, and now and they devalue themselves, struggling with self-worth. So, but I don't want to get straight too far from this ethics piece, because I think when you're talking about moral injury, it's talking about doing the right thing for that circumstance. And obviously, when you're talking in combat, it's situational, right? We have rules of engagement. We have reasons when it's okay for self-defense or for order or for a certain purpose to, execute that mission, including, taking lives. And done under the right circumstances, as you are definitely the SME here, the subject matter expert, then a person can execute the mission with the minimal amount of moral injury, harm to their own conscience.
Absolutely. I think.
Yeah, but I mean that requires a hell of a grounding. I mean,
yes,
that's
what I was going to say.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that really the challenge though? I mean, you get these young men and women. They come on board. They go through their initial training, and you're establishing some sort of baseline. But even with that, when they get out to their units, they're all at different levels. I mean, how does that training continue? How does that assessment happen? How does that training continue? How do we continue to give these people the foundation and the moral clarity to be able to make these decisions when they're put in these situations?
Well, my opinion, which is, worth whatever you're willing to pay for it, is that it's got to be a group effort, and it goes back to what Kevin said with leadership. I mean, I am literally a garden hose on a forest fire. I'm one chaplain, with anywhere from 700 to 900 guys I'm taking care of at a time. I can try to put out those fires if they're willing to come talk to me, or I can do my briefs where I try to talk to a group and hope they're not falling asleep. It's a thing where you need the help of leadership. You need to teach leadership how to be mentors, how, and obviously, as a chaplain, I can't go tell everybody my way is the right way, as far as my own faith. But we're trying to find a way to teach these skills and to pass it along. And I think if you can instill it in your leaders all the way down to your squad level, right? Where he's maybe dealing with a few guys, then he can impact change. But if you can't impact leadership and then they're doing it wrong, then it's just compounding the problem. Yeah. And we need leaders who are going to teach their guys. And I like, wow, I got to be careful here. I'm going to be all political and everything, but I'm a father. And so I can speak from my perspective as a father. And leadership done right is like being a parent doing it right. And I'm getting a little off topic here, but I promise it'll come back. You can do leadership wrong where you are the abusive parent who either uses words or violence to control his children or her children. Or you can be the parent that just really wants to be buddies with their kids and drops all the walls and does their kids a disservice. Or you can be that parent that holds in tension, mentoring healthy relationship while maintaining that difference in authority. And that's the biggest problem I see is that there's barriers to healthy leadership. And that's kind of like one of the things I'm working on right now is teaching people, look, there's two aspects to being a leader. You got to get your head right. You got to know how to teach, and the stuff that we're talking about, ethics here, right? And moral compass and protecting, having a healthy sense of spirituality. And there's the heart piece, right? Where you got to be a healthy individual. You can't bring your junk into the mix or you're going to be causing problems and not helping.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, heart and head. And it's certainly, I think if our leaders would do, I think we're putting it
here's
where it needs to be.
Here's what a challenge that I see today. There used to be a time, long time ago, when our officer corps was really landed gentry. They were our aristocracy, if you will. They were brought up a certain way, and one of the things that was very important to that sort of class, if you will, was their outward appearance, their demeanor, how they carried themselves. It was something that was always on their mind, because leadership was more than just like what you were talking about, being buddy or being a tyrant and beating the crap out of it. It was more being the example. You can lead just by having being something that others just look at. How do you handle every situation? How do you respond to every situation? I think the challenge today, a huge challenge today, is okay. We have people coming in. They're volunteering. Going through a reserve officer training corps. They're going to one of the service academies, whatever. They're really asked to do one hell of a transformation once they get commissioned to put a uniform on, because their backgrounds may be very similar to the very enlisted people that they're getting ready to lead. But they're having to assume an entirely different role and also deal with all of the things that you were talking about in society. I mean, I'm just looking at it, almost looks like a bridge too far.
Well, if I can speak to that, I definitely agree with the bridge piece. And what I see in my own experience day in and day out, I see a lot of good leaders, but there's a disconnect. And the Marine Corps is known for how far down it pushes leadership, which is a blessing and a curse, because you're really teaching young men and women the responsibilities of leadership, or you're giving them the responsibilities of leadership. You're trying to instill it in them. At the same time, wisdom usually comes out of our own mistakes, right? At least for me, I never really learned from listening to others. I had to run into the wall a few times before I figured out it wasn't the door. And so unfortunately, a lot of times age is not on our side. And again, I don't think these young men and women are prepared for the burden and the responsibility of leadership. I'm not going to say any specific cases where I'm at or anything, but honestly, I've been a little tongue in cheek said, sometimes I'm reminded of the novel, The Lord of the Flies, because you have sometimes what feels like children leading children, and it's kind of scary. I love my children, but there's no way on earth that I would trust my 9-year-old to watch my 5 or 6-year-old, because gosh, I might come home and they might both be dead or missing. At the same time, we're entrusting a lot of responsibility to young men and women that maybe, like I said, don't know how to do leadership. They didn't have a good example from where they came from, or they just never learned how to work through their stuff yet, and that gets in the way.
You made me think of something, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but you're old enough to remember back when we had a really strong NCO corps. At least we did in the Army, and I remember the NCO clubs, and it was a big deal for a young E5, a 20-year-old E5 or whatever, to be able to go to the NCO club and just hang out with the older, more experienced leaders. And there was a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of just useful information that you gather just by being able to have those opportunities to sort of hang out with your senior leaders. And I think at least in the Army, I don't, you can talk about the Marine Corps or in the Navy, but at least in the Army, I mean, that the NCO Corps is totally different now. We don't have the one beer lunch or whatever, and hanging out with the NCOs at the NCO club, and some of that those social events where we really were able to pass along that information that you're talking about, that experience, and have that camaraderie. Is it time to bring that back?
I'm so glad you said that word, because that's what was coming to my mind. And, I try not to get on a soapbox and go back and start. It's really easy to point my finger at, generational decline or society. But what I do see, and it's, it's just a fact of the times, a lot of guys don't really get together and, hang out and play and shoot hoops and go to the, to like the NCO club. You see a lot of guys spending time in the rooms, playing video games, the camaraderie. And Paul, you guys can probably speak to this better than me, because I've never been enlisted. And honestly, I've not been around the enlisted long enough to know what it was like when I was that age. But one of the biggest complaints I have is there's this dysfunction where, guys aren't getting along, and there's that loss of, I think I can speak to a general thing that beyond every other reason, beyond patriotism, beyond, the benefits of joining the military, like, hey, I'm going to get a free ride to college or whatever the recruiter enticed them with there. Most everybody comes here with the need to feel like they belong and to have that sense of, and I like to call it family. And I don't know if it was better in the past or if it's just, the same problem with a new label, because every generation, points their finger at the last one and the next generation and points the blame. I mean, it's true. You look at our generation, how we talked about our parents or how they talked about us and how we were all reprobates and stuff. But the reality is I see like this sense of this need for family not being fulfilled. And I think if I could just sum up the whole problem, these guys need to be part of a family. They need to feel, to quote a book I'm reading right now, they need to feel important.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody wants family. I mean, isn't that the reason why we have gang problems in a lot of the inner cities is because they're looking for that family, and they find it in the gangs.
Absolutely.
The armed forces is no different. You are right. I mean, every generation has its issues. The farther it gets away from the Vietnam vets, the time when I recall from those leaders that served in Vietnam when I first went in the military, the smarter those guys look to me. I mean, they just look like geniuses now. I mean, I feel sorry for anybody serving today that didn't have an opportunity to serve under those guys. They were exceptional in a lot of ways that I didn't really recognize when I was a young trooper. And so I don't know what the answer is, but there's also there is generational decline. I mean, I think the Vietnam vets would be the first one to tell you that they're probably not as tough as the World War II vets. And I think it can go back and farther and farther. And we just we do. Technology has a tendency to weaken society over time. I think that's pretty well established. That doesn't mean that there's not warriors in every class and every time. And we just want to make the warriors. We want to figure out what do we have to do to give our warriors what they need today, so they can carry the mantle. But I think there's some things that we can learn from the past and things that they were doing in past generations, past warriors that would help today's warriors.
Yeah, hey,
I completely agree, and I think one thing I thought of when you were talking about those Vietnam vets is, I believe that experience is probably the best teacher, and those guys had a hard reality to face, whether they wanted to be there or not, and the realities of war and how horrible it can be. It goes back to what I was talking with that major about. He said, the shenanigans, talking about things that still go on, the guys mistreating each other and all that stuff. He said you didn't see it because guys were going out on mission and their buddies were getting killed, and they came back, and when they told somebody something, it wasn't because they needed to feel good about themselves. It's because they knew how important it was for the guy to learn it so he didn't get killed or get his fellow Marines or sailors or soldiers killed the next day. So they took life a lot more serious because they'd seen how horrible war could be. And I think you're absolutely right. I think there's been, and it's been for a while, where we say, hey, new is better, old is passe. And, used to, we respected the wisdom of the elders because we knew they had done life and they probably knew a little more than we did, at least. And I think if anything that is lost in this new world is a departure of, hanging on to that wisdom from the past and from those who have lived it, and treasuring the wisdom of those.
Right on. Well said. Hey, Now, John, now as a chaplain, I know that one thing that you try to bring to the force is the spiritual fitness. Now, we had talked about that. You mentioned resilience, and I wonder if you could just kind of tease that out, like just talk on spiritual fitness and resilience, and how do you approach this situation and with those truths?
Right. Yeah. And honestly, being in a world where there's so many varying views, that's why, we kind of try to define it as that basic sense of purpose and meaning. It's tough, it's really a hard problem to get at. I can give you a list of things that say, hey, if you're feeling this way, maybe you're not taking care of yourself. I think if I was to just off the top of my head, I think one piece of spiritual fitness that is important is community. And that is, we found through research that people that participate in a community of faith on a regular basis have an incredibly lower risk of destructive behaviors, including suicide. And to me, it points back to the basic human need of connection. We were created to be in relationship. That is a foundational piece. And I know there are those who say, well, we weren't created. Well, then however you want to get to it.
Well, they can listen to another podcast.
No, here's the point. Scientists, psychologists, they will all agree, whether they believe in a higher power or not, they will all agree. Humans are relational creatures. We need one another. I mean, I always say, look, how do you torture somebody? You put them in isolation, right? You separate them. So when we're talking about spiritual fitness, one of those questions I ask, hey, do you have a faith? Are you connected to that community? Because that is very important, because that gives you, it's a safety net. As a chaplain, when I'm doing counseling, it's one of those things I want to check that box to make sure that person is not isolated in the world, that they have some sense of connection to others. And you know what? Sometimes maybe it's me. Maybe I'm the only person in the world that they have a connection to, but at least the two of us become a community for now until we can bridge that gap. So community is very important, whether it's a traditional religion, whether it's shared values and beliefs. It's very important that we are with like-minded individuals to draw strength from and support.
Let me ask you a question on the community, because I think, here's the question. A lot of these young folks, it seems to me, are getting their community through video games. Mm-hmm. And to me, I think that's false community. I don't think that's a real community, and there's got to be a difference there. How do they? I mean, I think you're right. I think they need to connect with other humans. I think they actually need to have all those normal sort of human interactions, looking at facial expressions and touch and all the rest.
Definitely, Mike. I don't disagree with you that there is a lot lost. If you don't believe me, text somebody a message and see how quickly it can get misunderstood. Yeah. Humans, obviously, we need that proximity, right? I think that is a piece that is, to me, the biggest concern about the online community piece. Not that it's not a community; it absolutely is. And these, I've seen it in action. I've seen, guys connected with each other, talking, communicating, still getting that sense of belonging, that sense of commonality. And I don't want to say, oh, it's bad, it's not enough. But I think we're definitely missing an aspect of humanity. And who knows? Humans are very resilient, maybe in some ways that's need of physical touch, of proximity, of patting your buddy on the shoulder, or the video helps a lot with the non verbal communications. You can see facial expressions and body language, so that can be conveyed electronically. So I don't want to just discount it altogether, but I think that the danger in being totally digital is we are going to sacrifice some of those social skills that we have. And honestly, I don't know how everyone else is, but I wouldn't be okay being in total isolation and never getting a hug or a pat on the back for the rest of my life. I would be missing out on a physical need that I have. You can go into Gary Chapman's love languages. It's obvious that physical touch, quality time can be virtual, yes, but so I don't want to run down this road too long. But my point is,
I think it is community. It is a sense of community, but it's not a 100% alternative.
I think there's a sacrifice there.
Yeah, I think you're right.
It's better than nothing. And if I'm talking to a Marine that feels all alone in the world, and he's got some buddies because they can't, he can't leave the barracks or whatever. He's got some buddies back in Iowa that he chats with or talks on the phone or
Good.
that.
Right.
I'm happy.
Right.
He's got a life connection out there.
Yeah.
It's better than nothing. It's a step up. But yes, I mean, same thing when you talk about. I was just talking to somebody the other day about they really miss that powerful spiritual experience they got from worship, and their worship now is Facebook Live. And I was like, look, I'm not going to discount being able to plug in, but there is something different about participating in a community of worship versus watching it on a TV. It's not the same, and it never will be. It's better than nothing, but I think it's not what it can be.
Yeah, that's obviously statistically, you could agree the people that have fallen prey to moral injury and have taken the drastic step of taking their own lives horribly, they didn't, perhaps they lack this important component of spiritual fitness. You could say that maybe they're isolated and
100%. Okay.
Yeah.
I think it is, if you could narrow it down, because, you can be in a community and still feel isolated. Mm-hmm. There's something within them that's creating a barrier to that human connection. They're not getting what they need. They don't feel loved, supported. They feel, like a burden, a problem. They're disconnected.
Hey, if I think that, if I could introduce this too, because I want to make sure we get this in here, is just the concept of resilience, because this is something that you had mentioned. This is an important aspect of this.
Before you go to resilience, and I think that's important, we need to cover that. But I have a question. People are less religious today, right? There's less people going to church today. To me, that's an extra challenge in the military. I would think, trying to make sure that they're having that spiritual connection that you're talking about. If they're maybe unfamiliar with a spiritual connection coming in.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of things they're unfamiliar with. When I talk about and as we bridge into resiliency, and I want to thank Paul for adding a fourth dimension. I've always looked at it as physically, emotionally, and spiritually, but socially, definitely circling back to that community piece. Yeah. But that sense of, I mean, most guys and gals don't really understand what spiritual fitness is or spirituality. But that's totally my lane. Like I said before, every human being needs to feel important. We need to feel like we matter. It goes down to the basic need for love. I know it's not always the most popular word because it's so misunderstood, but that primal connection that a baby has with its parents, that sense of I am loved, I am supported, I'm safe. And that the problem is, I think there's a disconnect between that and how people feel about themselves. And let me unpack that just real quick, briefly. Worth and the need to be loved are connected, because I think as human beings, most of us, if not all of us, kind of grew up with this misconception that we must prove ourselves worthy to be worthy of love. And I think it can be as simple as looking at a parent for approval and not receiving that approval and feeling like that we have failed and we're no longer worthy. So that, I mean, if you want to drill down to the deepest level of spirituality, it is self-worth. Mm-hmm. It is feeling like we matter, we have value. And and it's really sad because, I'm not going to say that I didn't struggle with that at some point in my own life. Coming from a Judeo-Christian background, I should have known better, because the very beginning of the scriptures that I read says that the very image of God is imprinted on my soul, which means, I have imminent value and worth. And that's not something I can earn, nor can be taken away. But we still grow up believing that we have to earn our place in this world to be worthy of love and respect. And I think that is most of our malfunction.
Yeah, that's well said. And so what is resilience? I mean, you offered a great definition of spirituality. We draw meaning and truth for life. How would you describe resilience? Because this is what's going to keep somebody latched on to and grounded in reality.
Right. And I want to introduce a word here that I like, and it's beyond resiliency, because resiliency is like the ability to bounce back.
Right.
And I heard it said this way really well. Fragility, which I think is what we're seeing a lot in our cultures. We have we have a fragile culture, fragile human beings, and fragility would be a candle in the wind, right? Not much takes to extinguish it. Resiliency would be like a torch in the wind, and that is, under most circumstances, as long as there's fuel there, that flame is going to rebound. It's going to come back. But it's a concept, and I like it. The word is anti-fragile. There's actually a lot of people going in that direction now, and it is really what I like to think of more like resiliency, and that is the wildfire. I mean, you think about what happens to a wildfire when the wind blows. It doesn't go out, it doesn't flicker, it actually grows. Mm-hmm. And it goes back to the fact that we can grow stronger through adversity.
Absolutely.
But if we don't have a foundation to stand on, if we think we're worthless in this world, we don't have a community of support, then we're pretty fragile. Yeah. We don't even know who we are. We don't know how to get a pulse on our spiritual or emotional well-being. We're already at our breaking point. It doesn't take much to crush us.
Right. If we have the foundational values, if that's in place, if we have this, yes. if that's there, then come what may, that which doesn't kill me makes me stronger. That's the idea.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I agree.
Well, but see, totally. we're all the same generation, and so I think when you use a word like fragility, well, that's negative connotations for me. I don't want to be fragile. I want to be resilient. But I'm wondering if today, if we've empowered fragile, if it's that's where you get the attention. If you're fragile, that's what makes you special. That's what sets you apart, is your fragility.
I completely agree, and we haven't found a healthy balance. Okay, when I was a kid and y'all were kids, bullies was a huge thing, and you had to deal with them, and hopefully you didn't get damaged too bad. Some of us are still dealing with that emotional trauma of playground ethics, but we went so far the other way that you're right. We've protected people, and I'm not saying I think bullying's horrible. I think there's a right way to strengthen people, and bullying is the wrong way. But you're right. We've so sheltered, our children, and I mean, my generation is just as much to blame. Not only did we use SpongeBob and forgive me, I don't hope I don't get sued now, but as the babysitter, right?
Right.
But we also, because of maybe our own wounds, we decided to overprotect them. And, that is dangerous because we've now said, no, we're not going to make you face adversity. We're not going to let you face adversity. It's too much. And that's why we want everybody to have a trophy, because we don't want to get disappointed. We don't want anybody to know what it's like to feel the way we did. And unfortunately, you're right. We are breeding fragility. We're protecting it in the name of thou shalt not, bully. But what we've said is now, you never have to face adversity, but it's not realistic, because you step out the door and mom and dad or grandpa and grandma, whoever was taking care of you, aunt, uncle, when they're gone and you have to face the fact that this world is not a shelter, that it's more of a storm, then you just don't know how to deal with it. And that's, I hate the word coping, because coping means surviving, but sometimes that's all we can do. They don't have the skills. They don't have the abilities. Nobody's taught them. They've never faced it. I used to be into horticulture, and I used to raise my garden in a greenhouse before I would take it out and plant it in the garden. And the worst thing you can do when you're raising plants that are going to be set out in the garden is to put them inside and protect them from the cold and the wind and the sun and all that stuff. Because as soon as you put them outside, guess what happens? They wither and they die.
Yep.
If they might survive, but most of them wither and they die. So one of the tricks you have is you set up an oscillating fan in there to simulate the wind, because if they don't face that adversity, they're not going to build up the strength to be able to withstand the wind when they're placed out in nature. And that's what we're doing. We're basically, it'd be like taking your dog that's never had to go hunt for food or defend himself and tossing him out in the wild and going, wow, why didn't he survive?
Yeah, and this implosion we're seeing is we're actually, and I just had this aha moment, but it's probably everyone else has already got it. But we're asking the youth today to serve in a capacity and do the things that generations before have done well. But there is really no foundation, or at least for the majority of them. They don't have that foundation, and now we're asking them and expecting them to do the same thing, and we're looking at it going, they're falling short, and I go, what's your problem?
Yeah,
but they're not the same guy coming through the pipeline.
We've totally destroyed the environment.
Yeah, and then we're like, what's going on?
And then we're like, dude, what's your problem?
We messed with the factory and
why aren't you a tough guy? I mean, Lordy.
But I think to your point too is, just for somebody that's listening to this, and I hope they would get some help. Maybe there's a guy, maybe that's you out there, and you're like, hey, you know what? I think I had enough. I mean, what could this man or woman do right now, Chaplain? What kind of resources? And of course, we would point to the Word of God, to the community of faith. But what else could they go to right now if they're feeling that way? They're feeling isolated and they feel like they don't have, a leg to stand on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, if we're talking, someone is to the point of making that life or death decision, there's so many resources these days. People who are trained, who and I think that's the I've been trained as a chaplain, and I continue to train and continue to learn. But when somebody comes in my office or I walk out there in the field and talk to them, I'm not doing that because somebody's paying me to do it. I'm doing it because I want to, because I care. Yeah. And there is lots of people in this world that care. If people just reach out, the biggest lie is nobody cares.
Yeah.
And the truth is that couldn't be further from the truth. There's tons of people in this world. I mean, there's online resources. There are, hotlines. There is, walk into your local church or synagogue and guarantee, if you don't find somebody that cares there, well, then walk down the street a little further, because, you picked the wrong building. But there's so many resources out there that people that want to help. And, and to me, when somebody walks in my office, that's one thing I want to make sure, hey, are you safe this weekend? Because I can help you to get through this. We can work. I can connect you with counseling resources. We can, but my number one goal is let me keep you alive, because I can't help you if you're dead. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's get through the storm. You're not alone. there's tons of us out there that do this because we care, because, God gave me a heart for people, and that's why I do this. I had a guy tell me one time, Chaps, you don't have all the answers, but you just don't give up until we find something.
Yeah.
And so I don't have all the answers, and a lot of times the answers are in their stories.
Yeah.
But just know that there's a world full of people that care if you just give us a chance.
Hey, and I think this is important to say this too, because a lot of us we go, hey, I would never do that. I would never get that into that place, that deep dark hole. Now, but I've had friends. I know you've had friends, guys. You think that never in a million years would they do that, and I felt like betrayed because the guy didn't call me, he didn't reach out to me. And the guys that you think that warriors, and there's no way, but they can get there. So I mean, my whole point is, you can get to that place. It can be very dark, and you need to reach out. I mean, be a man and reach out to your friend. I mean, it's okay to say, look, I am in this really dark, deep, dark place, and so what we're preaching here is to avoid that first off. But if you get to that place, say something. We can fix that. The
only constant is change. And we're talking about resiliency, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, resiliency, I think a good definition is the one that is a sort of, like you said, I mean, is able to kind of bend with the wind. Understands that change is every day. Every day things are going to change. You're going to be hit with new obstacles and curveballs and things that you just didn't see coming, and you just got to roll with it. I think the weak individual is always the person that needs the temperature to stay at 72 degrees, needs the sun to shine every day, and it's just not going to happen. My question, and I'm really curious because you're in the chaplain corps. I'm assuming it's relatively the same regardless of branch. I'm assuming the chaplain corps in the Army is very similar to the chaplain corps in the Navy. What type of challenges are you seeing in the chaplain corps? What's the chaplain corps doing to try to adapt and address these challenges today? Because I think it's got to be different being a chaplain today than it was 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's a tough question. One of the things we do, obviously, that I'm not as savvy as some of the younger chaplains is, we try to meet people where I don't want to say I'm not good at meeting people where they are, but the whole social networking thing and having pages where we're out there, and that's the new terrain now. Is you want to get to the guys. You're not going to go hang out at the NCO club and see most of them. You're gonna be hopping on social network platforms and try to connect that way. That's one of the ways. Obviously, knowledge is important. And one of my I'll get it here in a second. I've got a little quote for you. But while I'm trying to find that, we're just trying to spread the word that, hey, we need community. We teach our chaplains. Well, we do a lot of internal training, and, we go to our commands and we try to educate leadership. We try to provide opportunities and programs. And so here's what I wanted to say. Knowledge is the beginning of awareness, and awareness is the beginning of change. And I found that in my own journey as I would learn about things, and it wouldn't necessarily change my bad habits, but at least I was aware that I had them, and then I could start to try to make those changes. So the chaplain corps, we try to educate our chaplains. We try to make sure we're always congruent with the mission, because we're not here with our own mission. We're here to support the mission, right? To make sure that the Marines and sailors and Coast Guardsmen, airmen, soldiers, that they are equipped and ready to serve. And that means, helping them when they fall down, and helping to build them to be stronger, to have that strong ethical core that they make the right decisions so they don't end up with moral injury, that they have an awareness of what spirituality is at its core and ways to connect with it, ways to do spiritual and emotional and physical self-care, to take care of themselves, to be aware of how they feel and what's going on, and to and find healthy ways to nurture those aspects of who they are so that they're ready to fight.
One more question. When I was in basic training, every Sunday, you had a choice. You could be marched up to attend service, or you had some horrible menial task waiting for you if you decided you didn't want to go to church service, okay, or whatever. With time, I see the value of that. Now, for a lot of us, I mean, it was just a good opportunity to sleep in the pews. I'll be straight up honest with you. We were tired, and who wanted to do KP? But later, I mean, I'm looking back and I'm thinking it was just genius to at least introduce the young warriors to that whole spiritual aspect, and to just have that time and to be around others in that type of environment. I'm hoping we're still doing that in basic training, and if we're not, we probably need to bring that back and maybe and maybe enhance it.
So yes, I don't know the specifics of it. I've not served at a recruit training command yet, but talking to other chaplains and even some of the Marines and sailors that have been through, chapels are packed on Sunday. And I think it's a lot of that. Hey, for one, it's a chance to get a break away from everything. For two, I think a lot of guys and gals, it's a safe haven. It's a place that they can go and they can kind of, let down their guard a little bit. Just like when they come in my office, I'd say, hey, you don't have to stand at attention. Call me sir. You can call me Chaps, and I want to know the first name. So it's a safe haven. And absolutely, I'm trying not to be too biased here, but of course I believe in the tenets of my faith, and to know that they teach a great message that we are valuable, that we have meaning, and that God has a purpose for everyone. And so there's so much that they can take away from that. And still, I hear this all the time from chaplains who have been at Marine Corps recruiting depots or at basic training at Great Lakes. They're like, yeah, the chapels are standing room only, and they had services out here on base at one of our FOBs on base during a recent training event, and it was standing room only. So at some level, even though there's a decline in attendance, and you don't see it so much in the day-to-day chapel services on base, in those situations, and to digress a little bit, I mean, look at what happened when our country faced crisis back at 9/11. Record numbers of people were filling the pews. They were searching for hope, and that's the one thing that you can always find, in the church is hope.
Yeah.
And as a chaplain, that is the one message, no matter their faith background, that I always try to convey to them: hope. At the very bare minimum, the hope is that you don't have to go through this thing alone, that I am here with you to walk with you. I hope that answers your question.
It does. That's awesome. And I think that is, the chaplain corps that I remember. My dad, I grew up as a chaplain's son, and used to sneak out of the services when I was a little older. But I do remember I was brought up the right way, and I remember that hope and meaning and purpose are part of the message of the cross and the message of Christ crucified. So I know that you're a man that fears God and hates evil, and you're out there serving. And I appreciate you for coming on the podcast I just like want to offer you any parting shot.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. This is an opportunity. I'm honored. And you know, I I would say to everyone listening, hey, get your heart squared away, because it's always going to get in the way if it's not. And there's plenty of us. If you can't figure it out on your own, there's plenty of us out here that want to help if you give us a chance. You get your heart right, and the head usually follows suit.
That's right. That's right. And then if I could put you on the spot, Chaplain, if you could close us out with a word of prayer.
Yeah, absolutely. So for my contextual, are we talking public prayer or divine service prayer?
Divine service.
All right. Well, I'm going to invoke the name of my Lord then.
Amen.
Right.
Let's go.
All right, let us pray. Gracious Heavenly Father, God, I just want to thank you for these two men, for the message that they're pushing out to the world, out of the love of their hearts for you and for mankind. God, I pray that this message does not fall on deaf ears, that those who are listening will be impacted and changed, that they will find hope, they will find meaning and purpose, to know that they are loved and valued, and not to believe the lie that they are not. God, I thank you for this time. May you continue to bless us all, encourage us, give us wisdom, and help us to be faithful. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, brother.
Hallelujah.
Thank you.
Thank you. We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Pinelander Podcast. If you enjoy our unique content, please consider supporting our sponsors. SOF News, providing special operations news from around the world. It's where Paul and I go to keep abreast of what's going on within the SOF community. Check them out at sof.news. Blacksmith Publishing, been serving the warrior class since 2013. They have great titles written for warriors by warriors. If you're looking for excellent reference material or just want to unwind with a great novel, be sure to check out the bookstore located at blacksmithpublishing.com. And if you're looking for some cool Pinelander apparel, head on over to the general store located at pinelandergeneralstore.com. That's all one word, pinelandergeneralstore.com. Have a great selection of shirts, hats, jackets, sweaters, stickers, patches, artwork, and a whole lot more. Check out the store at pinelandergeneralstore.com. If you're interested in helping develop our country's next generation of warriors, please consider donating to the American Agoge Project. The mission of the project is to foster an environment producing able-bodied citizen warrior men of fine character. And we'll be officially launching the project in 2023 in celebration of Blacksmith Publishing's 10th anniversary. Until our next meeting, stay mentally and tactically smart, physically and spiritually strong, and socially astute. To each other we pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. May God continue to bless Pineland.